Dynasty startups are going fast and furious right now. We figured we would bring you guys a bunch of values, a bunch of busts. We're going to be going round by round, talking about some overvalued players in startups right now, talk about some undervalued players. Today, we're going to be tackling the first 4 rounds of Dynasty startups. We're going to be using Adiko FF's ADP to do that from Sleeper. And then, in the coming days, we're going to do rounds 5 to 8, rounds 9 to 12, and so on and so forth. So before we get into it, Danny, how you doing?
Doing well, doing well. And yeah, you guys showed a ton of support when we did this last year. Absolutely love the videos. And if you go back to some of those videos, we had some pretty decent hit rates to say the least. So hopefully once we're reflecting upon this video a year from now, we can say the same because it's fun breaking down the ADP. It's fun seeing those value pockets. And if you guys follow FSE, you know we'll have some pretty big discrepancies from the market. But with that being said, let's get right into it.
All right, so you guys are definitely going to notice some trends. I mean, obviously, if you watch this channel, you know we're about to say that some running backs are overvalued, some quarterbacks are undervalued, some aging assets are overvalued, that kind of thing. But we will try and, break down why we think they're overvalued, not necessarily just, oh, they're an older running back kind of thing. So the first round, we're going to be honest, it was difficult to come up with values and busts for this one. So we're not really going to break down like, okay, we're each going to talk about a value for this round. We're each going to talk about a bust for this round, like we're going to do in the coming rounds. But overall, when you look at the first round landscape, is there anything that stands out to you, that you would change or that differs from your rankings?
Well, I mean, the only real difference I would say is, for me, Bijan Robinson and CeeDee Lamb are at the 11-12 there. I personally would prefer, Deshaun Watson, Kyler Murray there, and we'll get into a couple of those round 2 quarterbacks in a second. But that would be the difference for what I would actually replace on this first round list. But in terms of placement, I have some little like nitty things, like for example, Justin Jefferson being the 106. Like I would take Lamar Jackson, Trevor Lawrence over him, but overall, though, aside from that, I mean, it's pretty well priced.
Yeah, I think that's my only major difference. To me, is I would take Lamar and Lawrence over both receivers, and I think that's how it should be. And also, I don't think Bijan Robinson and CeeDee Lamb rank inside my first round. I have, like you said, those second round quarterbacks that we're going to talk about ranked slightly ahead of those guys, and only once those guys are off the board would I consider Bijan Robinson and CeeDee Lamb. So yeah, the round 1 landscape, generally speaking, is pretty fairly priced. Not going to nitpick too much, but we did have some discrepancies, and mainly it was that in my first round, I don't know about yours, Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase are the only non-quarterbacks in my first round rankings.
Same. So personally for me right now, you guys can see all of our rankings over on flockfantasy.com, but for a little reference, I have Jefferson at 8, Chase at 9 as the 2 in the first round. And then after them, I have a 3 quarterback tier of Justin Fields, Deshaun Watson, Kyler Murray, with Bijan Robinson right on the outside looking in at 13, and CeeDee Lamb also right on the outside looking in at 15th overall. So again, if you want to nitpick, you can say that those guys are overvalued because we view them as second round picks versus first round picks. But realistically, when you're talking about like a 3-pick buffer, it is not a big deal.
Yeah, absolutely. But we like to build our team around foundational quarterbacks,
Yep.
hence why we value those quarterbacks a little bit highly. So let's get into the round 2 range where we actually do have some legitimate takes. And I'll start it off with my round 2 value, and then you can kind of get into yours. I think Kyler Murray is significantly undervalued here. He is going off the board at 23rd overall, and I kind of understand why. I think it's probably due to the fact that you are somewhat pigeonholed into rebuilding, or at least coming up with a contingency plan at quarterback if you take Kyler Murray, especially if you didn't go with a quarterback in the first round or something like that. Like say if you took Justin Jefferson in the first round, then you take Kyler as your QB1, then you're really pigeonholed into rebuilding because then Kyler is not on the field for you and he's the quarterback 1 for your team. But for me, the value insulation that he represents as a guy who's been basically a top 5 quarterback the last 3 years, anytime he's been on the field, and a guy who's still very young, still like 25, 26 years old, regardless of what happens in Arizona, whether they keep him, whether they trade him away, he's going to be a stud franchise quarterback for your dynasty teams for a long time. And to me, when you have that kind of projection, that's what a first round pick should represent. So for me, I have him ranked at 12th overall, right on the borderline of the first round. And I'm very comfortable. You guys have seen us do mock drafts, and we've done a couple live streams if you want to go check those out of us doing startup mock drafts. I'm very comfortable taking Kyler Murray as my first player off the board if I'm picking in that late first round area.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I mean, if we're looking at it here, he's obviously a value for me as well. But if we're looking at it here, you're telling me that the Josh Allen team is going to be able to wrap around and get Kyler Murray. like for me personally, I think Kyler at floor, even if you're like super, super off of him, you're worried about the knee, you don't know how it's going to look like. Like he's still got to be a guaranteed top 15 pick because if anything, you just don't want those elite quarterback teams at those 1 to 3 spots to be able to stack up on two of those guys. And that's another principle that I feel like people don't talk about enough is that, yes, you want to build your team around quarterbacks, but you also want to prevent those teams at the 1, 2, and 3 spots from stacking up 2 elite quarterbacks because you're already at a disadvantage if they have Josh Allen, if they have Patrick Mahomes, if they have, Jalen Hurts from a point per game perspective. If you're going to go out and let them get one of those elite quarterbacks at the end of the second round, I think that is a mistake. And that kind of gears to who my guy is. I have Dak Prescott here, ranked as my 14th overall player. So a guy I'm willing to take in the early second of Superflex drafts, going at the end of the second round. And yes, I do prefer personally Kyler Murray to Dak Prescott, have Kyler Murray at 12, Dak at 14, but it's pretty much the same principle. You're getting a relatively young, he's older from what he was a couple years ago, but he's still a 29-year-old quarterback. He's still an elite quarterback in the NFL. We still expect this offense to be very, very good, top 5 level offense for the Dallas Cowboys. And if you're getting that level of ceiling from an offense, like, yes, he's not going to be able to run the ball like a 25-year-old Dak Prescott would, but what we could expect from the air, we can expect 30, 35 touchdowns. We can expect 4,500 plus passing yards. We could basically expect pretty much 90 to 95% from a passing output standpoint of what we put in for Joe Burrow. And Joe Burrow's a top 5 overall pick. And there's only really, a 2 or 3 year buffer between them in age?
Yeah, Burrow, I believe 26 or 27, and then Dak will be 30 in July this year. So he will be 34 this season. I actually started off our Devy startup with Trevor Lawrence and Dak Prescott as the first 2 picks that I made in there. I think he's an awesome QB2 to get for your team because he's one of the better QB2s that you can reasonably acquire in a startup, unless you're obviously trading up and you can go out and acquire another quarterback that way. But yeah, I'm totally on board. I have him a little bit lower than you. I have him at 16 because I do have Bryce Young ahead of him.
Sure.
But that's pretty much the discrepancy between where we have those guys, and I have Lamb and Bijan Robinson slightly ahead of him in my overall rankings as well. Now let's get into some guys that are overvalued in this round 2 area. For me, Anthony Richardson is one that is overvalued, and not necessarily because I'm like lower on the position. You guys know we hoard quarterbacks like nobody's business. I just think his rank among quarterbacks is a little too high, just given the risk profile that comes with him. Obviously, I know the upside case. Everybody knows the upside case. He's the best athlete that's ever tested at the combine, and he's going to run the ball in the NFL, but he does have the bust scenario as well. And for me, why would I take Anthony Richardson hoping he's going to become Kyler Murray when I can just take Kyler Murray? Like, it's the mystery box meme from Family Guy. Like, I get it. Anthony Richardson's upside is real. And if he's a 21-year-old version of Kyler Murray, 22-year-old version of Kyler Murray, he's going to be more valuable on the market. But I do think it's worth noting that he also could still bust. So I would rather take that risk in the mid-second round, late second round area than I would in the early portion of the second round. And also, I would rather take Bryce Young among the other rookie quarterbacks over Anthony Richardson, which is also kind of part of that discrepancy for me.
Yeah, and I would agree to a certain degree that I personally wouldn't take Anthony Richardson over the other quarterbacks. I don't think if somebody wanted to take him, what is that, 14th overall? Like, I don't think that's egregious because I have him at 17th. But like you kind of said, it just comes with the context that you're taking him over Kyler Murray. You're taking him over Deshaun Watson in particular. Like, if you want to argue him versus Bryce versus Dak, sure. But the Kyler Murray and Deshaun Watson part in particular is where I can't get on board. So as a result, like you kind of said, I have him ranked at 17th overall. So 14th, while it's not crazy, once you consider the context, it does make a lot of sense. But overall, we can move off of Anthony Richardson. We can go on to my bust, and that's going to be, if you guys see the draft board, you're going to know right off the bat who I'm going to be picking. It's Christian McCaffrey. He's ranked right now as the 16th overall player on Adico's ADP. I have him ranked as my 34th overall player. Listen, I understand from a point production, from a win now perspective, what Christian McCaffrey is able to do for your team. And I actually got a share of Christian McCaffrey in a more running back depleted room. I got him at the 405. I thought that was good value there. If you want to take this guy at the end of the third round, maybe because you have, let's just say hypothetically in the first and second round, you picked up Dak Prescott and Deshaun Watson or something like that. Yeah, sure. Go Christian McCaffrey if you want to gear towards a win now, because you notice the rest of the room is not doing so. But by taking him at 16th overall, you are pigeonholing yourself from a value perspective to a 27-year-old running back by round 2 when, like we kind of mentioned, Kyler Murray's on the board, Bryce Young's on the board, some of those young wide receivers are on the board. Dak Prescott's on the board. Like, there's just way too much quarterback and wide receiver talent for me to take a 27-year-old running back at this point in the draft. If this was even the 309, so you see here 204 he went, even if this was the 309, I'd be okay with it there, but 204 is just egregious.
Yeah, and I think this is an interesting exercise for a couple reasons, because number one, like, this is an our sourced ADP from like people in our community and our audience, because I'm sure nobody listening to this, if you guys are avid supporters of us, would take Christian McCaffrey this high, because it breaks a number of the rules that we talked about in Sunday's video, which is you're instantly in a competitive window the second you select Christian McCaffrey, and you want to make that decision as late in the draft as humanly possible so you have the most information about your league and about how other people are drafting. And also, you're not building a strong foundation when you take Christian McCaffrey. I think I like Christian McCaffrey for contending teams, not in startup drafts. Like, I would rather, if I intend on contending, just trade for Christian McCaffrey later, because honestly, on the open market, when is Christian McCaffrey going for less than Garrett Wilson, Jalen Waddle, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Bryce Young, Kyler Murray, and Dak Prescott? Like, it's never going to happen, at least in most of the leagues that we play in. But because Adeko pulls from like all of Sleeper's database, it gives us a good idea, more blanket statement wise, of what Christian McCaffrey's price is, not outside of our audience, especially if you guys are playing in leagues with your home league buddies and that kind of thing. This is where Christian McCaffrey will be valued on that type of league market versus the league markets that you guys see us do in mock drafts on live streams.
Well, I mean, if we're contextualizing it, that's the 204 16th overall player. If we're contextualizing it, when we did our rankings video, I believe our 16th overall player was still worth two and a half premium firsts, two premium firsts and a second.
My 16th overall player is Dak Prescott, so I still value him as a 2 first rounders plus type of asset.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, because in 80+% of the leagues, who's paying 2+ premium first round picks for Christian McCaffrey?
No, and like, there's not a lot, unless you're in a very redraft centric league. That's kind of the league market that we're talking about here, which I'm glad is why we pulled this ADP from Adeko and not necessarily from like our ADP or from like our Flock Fantasy like consensus rankings or something like that, because that's when it gets a little bit more hairy. That is round 2. We can move on to round 3, where again we're going to do a bust and a value in each round. I'm going to go with T. Higgins as the value. I've talked about him, kind of his outlook, why he's such a great option. He's going the latest of the tier 2 to 3 wide receivers. And that's why he's the best value, because the whole basis of tier-based rankings is that all these guys are on a similar playing field. So the last guy in each tier typically is the best value, because T. Higgins, while I view CeeDee Lamb ahead of T. Higgins, they're not a ton miles different in terms of value, and you have to pay the 112 in this example, or like a early second rounder for AJ Brown or a mid second rounder for Garrett Wilson, versus T. Higgins, who there's a difference between those guys, but it's not seismic. It's the fact that I can get T. Higgins at the 307 when I have him ranked as my 27th overall player, just an early third round pick. To me, it makes a lot of sense. If I'm building a flexible build like we like to build at the beginning of our drafts, and I can start off Josh Allen, Kyler Murray, and T. Higgins to build that type of build, it's pretty insane to me. So for me, Higgins, when you're talking about a guy attached to a great offense, yeah, he's competing for targets with Jamar Chase, but we buy talent and youth in Dynasty, and T. Higgins has both of those things.
Yeah, 100%. So in terms of T. Higgins, again, very, very good value here. Like you kind of said, mid-third round, I think, is where I'd be willing to take the plunge as well. Gearing off of him, though, my player is actually ranked one spot behind him in Adeko's rankings. That's going to be Kyle Pitts, a 22-year-old tight end from Atlanta. In my opinion, he is the clear-cut tight end 1 in Dynasty. So as you'll get into a second, the fact that he's not even the tight end 1 listed here is pretty head-scratching in my opinion. I personally think with Kyle Pitts, a guy I have personally ranked as my 22nd overall player, end of the second round type of player in startups, he ends up going in the late third round, and it just doesn't really make sense to me. We already know what kind of Kyle Pitts pretty much represents. He was the best tight end prospect of all time, 4th overall draft capital, one of the most athletic tight end prospects we have ever seen come out. And in his rookie season, had a 19+% target share as a rookie at tight end. Now, people are wondering, well, if he had such a good profile, if he had such a good rookie season, what happened in his second season? Well, I personally think that's just a product of the offense, because we look at that offensive situation going from Matt Ryan to Marcus Mariota in Atlanta. 24.4 pass attempts per game, which was 31st only behind the Chicago Bears in the NFL last year, and 158.8 passing yards per game, which, again, only second worst in the NFL behind the Chicago Bears. This Atlanta Falcons passing offense was just downright terrible. if you actually look into the numbers and you look into the advanced stats of both Kyle Pitts and a guy we're going to be talking about later into today's video, you break it down and you see a completely different story. You see this absolute target munching tight end with a 28% target rate when he was healthy last year. I understand the situation has to get better if we want that point production to match. But when we buy players, we buy them off talent. And from a peripheral standpoint, with his ability to command targets, with his ability in the open field, with the frame, with the speed, with the athleticism, everything that Kyle Pitts represents as an alpha share tight end, I'm willing to play in the third round. So if he's slipping at all from the end of the second round, like we're talking about a late third round pick here. And again, if we're looking at the ADP boards and you have Kyle Pitts at the 308, and you could potentially pair him up with Lamar Jackson, Garrett Wilson, Kyle Pitts, or Justin Herbert, Jalen Waddle, Kyle Pitts, or even I hate keeping on using the example, but if we go back to the team too and we say, hey, you can have Josh Allen, Kyler Murray, and Kyle Pitts as your first three picks, I would be absolutely ecstatic to leave my first 3 rounds with that combo.
That's literally the team I drafted when we did our startup mock draft on whatever day that was, a couple days ago. So yeah, I'm totally on board with Pitts. We're talking about a guy too that the underrated part about him is people always blame Arthur Smith for like not using him correctly. Like Arthur Smith legit used him as like an outside wide receiver, which doesn't happen at the tight end position. And it's why his upside is so high, because if he hits to the tune of a high ceiling wide receiver, we're talking about an 18, 19, 20 point per game season, which is unheard of for a tight end. And especially if you're in a tight end premium league, 18, 19, 20 points becomes 21, 22, 23 points in a tight end premium league. So that is the big draw with Kyle Pitts. So I'm totally on board. There's very few assets that can become untouchable in Dynasty available in the third round of startups. And that's pretty insane to me that Kyle Pitts is available there. When we go to the guys that are overvalued, we'll go back to the tight end position for mine. I love Travis Kelce. He's a future Hall of Famer. He's one of the best tight ends pass catching wise that I've ever seen in my lifetime. He should not be going in the third round of a dynasty league. A dynasty league is a long-term game. You want to maintain flexibility as long as possible, more so than any other asset that exists. You are instantly in a competitive window. You better try and win your championship year one with Travis Kelce. And I get it. He is probably on par with this value-wise because he's so valuable at his position. He's such an advantage over every other tight end in fantasy in a redraft setting. But he could be a dead asset 1 year from now. I cannot take that guy as a top 30 startup player. And I definitely cannot take him over Pitts at the tight end position, knowing that Kyle Pitts, even if he's like a 13 point per game tight end next year, he's literally 22 years old versus 34 years old.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because we saw from a point production standpoint, by far the floor of Kyle Pitts, and he's still going in circles where we see here that they're valuing more production over youth and potential value accrual. He's still going in the third round. I understand that Travis Kelce is not going to have a 2022 Atlanta Falcons season. That's not my argument here. But if he's not the elite difference-making tight end, he's going to be 35 years old going into the offseason. He's going to be an asset that this time next year, if he doesn't average 17, 18 plus PPR points per game, is going to be probably a 5th or 6th at max round pick in Dynasty startups. And even then, like you kind of said, the risk profile, he's an older tight end. We don't know when he's going to fucking retire. What if he just wakes up on a win next offseason? He's like, yeah, you know what? My body is hurting me. I've been playing at a Hall of Fame high level at the tight end position for the last 10 years. You know what? Let me just go out and support the team. Like otherwise, like I can't play anymore. You never know when those scenarios are going to happen with older players. And I'm not just talking about like a 29, 30-year-old tight end. Like, because if he was that old, I could stomach taking him in, the top 35, the top 30 of my drafts. But the fact that he's in his mid 30s is genuinely terrifying if you have this guy as an asset, because guess what? If you don't win in year one, and let's just say hypothetically, you are looking within the first 2 years of the startup to potentially retool, Travis Kelce might be worth a third round pick in 2 years' time.
No, not he. He might be worth a third round pick if he gets injured midseason, dealing with a hamstring injury all year, and then we go into next offseason and he doesn't know if he's going to play. Like, he might be a dead asset in the third round versus conversely, like we talked about with Pitts, a guy that could be untouchable in the third round. I know what asset I'm going after. Even if I'm intend to be in a competitive window, I would rather have Pitts because I'm losing 3 to 4 points per game upside case for Kelsey. Obviously, he can be an 18, 19, 20, 25 point per game type of scorer in tight end premium leagues. But with Pitts, at least you get that longevity factor. So yeah, I'm sure I'm going to eat my words on it because Kelsey will probably be unbelievable this year again. But it's about the principle of taking that high priority, high leverage of an asset that early in your drafts. It's a difficult pill to swallow. And I would rather, like I said with Christian McCaffrey, go trade for Travis Kelsey as a contender than draft him in the startup because, like we see on the board here, Chris Olave went one pick ahead of him. You know how much more you'd have to add to Chris Olave or to Travis Kelsey to get to Chris Olave, in my opinion?
Oh, a ton, at least a first round pick, probably a first and a second if we're being realistic. But I'm glad you mentioned that because people think when we talk about, oh, these guys are bust, these guys are fades, these are guys are not that we don't want in fantasy. That's nothing to do with it. Like Kelsey is an elite talent, and I will have a couple shares in redraft. I will definitely get exposure to him in underdog tournaments. You know what I mean? Like I'm gonna have shares of Travis Kelsey, but just because I'm gonna have shares in different formats doesn't mean I need to commit to him in my dynasty league. Dynasty is for a reason. It's going to last past this year. It's going to last in most scenarios past next year. If I'm picking an asset that I know is basically going to be dead on the market as we go through my dynasty league journey, what's the point? Whereas in redraft, it's like, yeah, cool. You draft Travis Kelce. If you notice some slight decline, there's still going to be somebody that's willing to buy him because they know they only have him for a year. Or hypothetically, if you want him in DFS, let's just say hypothetically the Chiefs play the Chargers this one week and you want Kelce in your lineup. Go for it. Doesn't mean you have to commit to him in Dynasty.
Yeah, exactly. So let's close out the third round with a guy that I will say is probably not going in the third round of the startups we've done. And I've seen some of you guys comment on videos that you've gotten this guy in like the 7th round of startups or whatever. But in more casual leagues that value running back position and running back talent, Kenneth Walker is probably going higher than he should be.
Yeah, and it's funny because he's obviously my bust here. I have him ranked 54th overall. He's going 33rd overall in the Deco ADP, and he's not someone I feel like I'm low on because I understand that he's a very, very talented runner. He's in a very solid projecting Seattle Seahawks offense. It's just I don't think the ADP quite has adjusted to Zach Charbonnet quite enough yet. And even if he was ranked 33rd overall prior to the NFL draft, I think that's reasonable. You want to take this guy at the end of the 3rd round, young, appreciating to running back who had a really, really good end to the year, go for it. But Zach Charbonnet is a good running back prospect. Zach Charbonnet does exist in this backfield. Zach Charbonnet was picked in the 2nd round, and Zach Charbonnet does have a 3-down skill set that, as much as we want to project Kenneth Walker to take the step up, simply didn't showcase in college and simply didn't showcase in the NFL. From a pure volume standpoint, he had a solid, rookie peripheral season from a receiving standpoint. But when you actually look at the efficiency, it's not hard to reason why the Seahawks wanted to go out and get a proven pass catcher. Because although he commanded, 45 targets last year, Kenneth Walker was one of the most inefficient receiving running backs in the NFL last year. So while I do like him in certain points, you want to get him in, late round 4, round 5 type of area in your startup. I think that's fine because I do think this guy can be one of the best real life NFL runners. But if he's not getting that 3-down workload, with Zach Charbonnet there, I don't project happening barring an injury, then why are we taking him in the 3rd round? Whereas if we look at the other running backs in this round, like Jahmyr Gibbs, 12th overall pick, Saquon Barkley, we know he's going to be a win-now guy. With Kenneth Walker, you're basically taking a rebuilding type of asset given the age. But as we know, if you've watched our videos, you don't take a running back to rebuild around.
Yeah, exactly. I would much rather take some of the receivers we're going to talk about in round 4 over Kenneth Walker. I got him at the 506. Back to the example we talked about, I got Lawrence in the 1st round, Dak in the 2nd round, Olave in the 3rd. So I built out that foundation. I got a lot of information about my league. I realized running back started to slip. In the 4th round, I take Saquon Barkley. In the 5th round, I take a falling Kenneth Walker. To me, that's the point in time where I would pull the trigger on Kenneth Walker if he was on the board in the 5th round type of area. But if it's a casual league like most of these sleeper ADPs that we're pulling from are, he might go in the 3rd round still as like the RB 8 or 9 off the board. And to me, that's just far too early.
It's funny you mentioned, you said you got him, the 506?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I actually have him ranked exactly as my 506 in my ranking. So 54th overall, if you do the math, 4 times 12, 48, and then 506. So
yeah,
that's
I'm at 52, so he's slightly ahead for me, but yeah, he's still overvalued in this market. So let's close this video out with round 4. Like I said, round 5 through 8 we will cover probably tomorrow or the day after that. My value in round 4 is Devontae Smith, who I would absolutely take over Kenneth Walker in a heartbeat. I have him at 31st overall. He is going off the board here at 38th overall as the 402 in the ADP here. Devontae Smith is like just the lower version of T. Higgins. Like he's going to get the stigma of being a number 2 receiver. So he's not ever probably going to be early second round startup pick. I don't think he has quite that kind of ceiling unless something were to happen to AJ Brown, he gets traded or something like that. But Devontae Smith can be a high-end wide receiver 2, low-end wide receiver 1 from a production standpoint for the next 3 to 5 years. As long as Jalen Hurts is playing at the level that he showed last year, I think Devontae Smith is a phenomenal value at this point in time. And you can get him with as your 4th player, right? Like you can build out a 2 quarterback start with Justin Fields, Deshaun Watson, or something like that, like this guy did. Then you can take another anchor wide receiver or Kyle Pitts if he's falling or whatever. And then you can get Devontae Smith as your wide receiver 2. To me, it's great value at this point in the draft.
Yeah, no, I absolutely love Devontae Smith there. I also have him ahead of market. He is, I believe, my wide receiver 12 overall in Dynasty. And given how we have wide receivers ranked, you guys know we have that very high. So overall, Devontae Smith, like you kind of mentioned, very similar type of projection to a guy like T. Higgins. Obviously, we know that T. Higgins and the Bengals are probably going to throw the ball more, which is why you prefer T. Higgins. But with Devontae Smith, we saw last year that this is a very concentrated target share on the Eagles. And although they don't throw it 600, 650 times, we know that the majority of the targets, we're talking 55+% of the targets, are going to be concentrated between Devontae Smith and AJ Brown. So absolutely love that. Young wide receiver showed out. Now we just have to bank on it, keep on going. And with what we saw in his this past season, I don't see any reason why it wouldn't. But similar to Devontae Smith, another young wide receiver that I have ranked by far ahead of this consensus is going to be Drake London. I already made the case, if you will, last round for Kyle Pitts, but I think Drake London is another elite talent wide receiver that, given the status of the offense, is going to slip in some of your drafts. He's currently going as the 41st overall player in Adico's ADP. He is my 27th ranked player. And if we're looking at the ADP right now, like I get it. You want to rank Garrett Wilson ahead of Drake London? Go for it. But with what we know right now, given their status as prospects, we both thought that they were similar prospects. Actually, we both had Drake London ahead of Garrett Wilson as a prospect. He goes 8th overall last year. He has a season where he commands a near 30% target rate as a rookie wide receiver. And now his ADP is basically 2 rounds after Garrett Wilson. Like, yeah, you want to rank Garrett Wilson ahead, go for it. But these guys should be within, 7 places of each other. I personally view Drake London as an early 3rd round type of pick, hence the 27 overall ranking. The fact that you can get him in the mid 4th round right now is egregious. He's going off as the wide receiver 15 right now. Like, I get it. People are going to argue, well, if you're winning now, why wouldn't you take Cooper Kupp? Why wouldn't you take Stephon Diggs? Why wouldn't you take, Devonta Adams? And I understand from a win now perspective why you would want that production. But I would rather the ceiling of a 21-year-old wide receiver with the peripherals that Drake London has if Desmond Ridder steps up as the quarterback, or if the Atlanta Falcons end up being bad next year and get a quarterback. We can see this guy become a consistent 1,200, 1,300 plus yard wide receiver, and you're getting him at, by that time, 22, 23 years old. So for me, Drake London is one of the easiest buys in Dynasty. And quite frankly, we make this comparison all the time, but he is literally beachfront real estate this time in a year. I can tell you right now, this 405 ranking is going to be closer to the 205 ranking if he lives up to his potential in the 2023 season.
Yeah, it's such an easy buy. Like you said, it's probably the easiest buy at wide receiver in all of Dynasty right now, because we would not be having this conversation if he went to an offense that threw the ball more than like 460 times on the season. If he went to an offense that threw the ball 560 times, which is a pretty big jump for the Falcons to take. But again, we're playing the long-term game. We're not saying that that's going to happen this year necessarily. But if they stink, if they get a quarterback upgrade, if they trade for Kyler Murray, like there's so many outs that Drake London could go up in value. If he's a 30% target share receiver as a 21-year-old rookie, what can he do with a quarterback upgrade? If he was on a team that threw the ball a ton last year, he would be the consensus Dynasty wide receiver 3 right now.
By the way, for the record, for people that are looking at, oh, okay, well, what was the trends of the season? How did he really show out? Well, we saw that he started out the season very hot. 7 targets, 12 targets, 6 targets, 7 targets, 7 targets in his first 5 games. And we also saw that he finished the season very strong. 12 targets, 11 targets, 9 targets, 8 targets, 8 targets. Everything that we've seen from a peripheral standpoint, especially when we want to see it. We want to see him come out as a rookie and demand targets right away. We want to see him close his rookie season improving as a rookie wide receiver, hence the target totals that he showed. This is a player that outside of one game where he had 47 yards, 95 yards, 70 yards, 96 yards, 120 yards for a rookie wide receiver with Marcus Mariota / Desmond Ridder as his quarterback. And we're not talking about the projection we have for Desmond Ridder potentially going into this year. We're talking about rookie Desmond Ridder with one NFL offseason under his belt as a third round rookie quarterback who didn't start the season, stepped in the middle of the season, and yet Drake London was still productive. Now, if we're looking at it, if Desmond Ridder does take this step up that people potentially project Desmond Ridder taking, I think Drake London may very well be a top 15 overall wide receiver in redraft this year. And if that's the case, he's going to be the wide receiver 5, wide receiver 6 in Dynasty by this offseason.
Yeah, and like I said, I think he has the upside to be wide receiver 3 in Dynasty, given the fact that he's so young. And if we get a random spike quarterback upgrade like a Kyler Murray coming in, I think he could really, really go up in value. To close this video out, let's talk about 2 running backs rapid fire here. My bust in this round is Austin Eckler. Similar to Travis Kelce, we're talking about a guy that probably has a 1 to 2 year window. And I like to maintain flexibility in the draft. Although I will say by round 4, you have enough information to kind of make that determination. So I'm not super, super low on taking Austin Eckler. I just generally like to build out even more young talent before adding in my running backs. Because if I wanted to go for a competitive running back, I would just probably punt it until later in the draft, take Aaron Jones, take, whoever at that point in the draft. For me, Austin Eckler at the range where we're taking DK Metcalfs and Drake Londons and Devontae Smith and Daniel Jones and those kind of guys, those are just more foundational type of assets to me. So I would rather pass on Austin Eckler, miss out on his production, and take a later on, win now running back if I'm deciding to go towards a competitive window.
Yeah, no, I fully agree with you with Austin Eckler. You have him 72nd as well, because that's exactly where I have him. And that's going to be, like we see here, 30 after the Adeko ADP. If you want to take Austin Eckler in your startup, I think that's fine. The problem, though, is all about opportunity cost. If you're getting him closer to 72nd overall, where we're looking at some of the win now wide receivers in that range, 72nd overall, you want to take him over Terry McLaurin. You want to take him over fucking, I don't know, Russell Wilson, Geno Smith, Rashad White, guys like that. Go for it, man. Like, you want to try to win your championship, sure. But once you start taking them over, like you said, some of those names, DK Metcalf, Devontae Adams, Christian Watson, some of those guys, it's just way too egregious from a cost standpoint. And instead of taking Austin Eckler in the 4th round, why not just wait a little bit and get Aaron Jones in the 9th round?
Yeah, or even Derrick Henry at the 604. And I think in some circles, Derrick Henry is going to go even lower than that. Like if you're in a running back fade type of room, it's the same projection. It's a 1 to 2 year window max with Derrick Henry. It's probably a 1 to 2 year window max with Austin Eckler. And you can get Derrick Henry in, running back fade circles in like the 7th, 8th round versus spending the 4th round pick on Austin Eckler. So let's close this video out with your bust here. Najee Harris, no surprise there. Danny has a personal vendetta against this guy. I actually have him relatively close to where he's going here. I have him behind ADP as well. I have him at like 54, but I do think Najee Harris is still kind of overvalued here in the 4th round. And I know exactly why you're going to say he is.
Yeah, I mean, like, again, like, I'm starting to warm up a little bit more on Najee, but warming up is more so like if he's like a 6th round pick. If he's a 6th round pick, I'm like, okay, maybe you take the plunge there. You got the workload. Like, I get it. The pros of Najee Harris is that everybody who's pro Najee Harris is expecting this 320 plus touch workload. He's going to be this ground and pound fucking bell cow running back in a state of a market in the NFL where we don't typically see that type of volume. I understand it. The problem I have, quite simply, is if I'm picking a running back in the 4th round and he's 25 years old, I want him to be at least very, very good at football. I want him to be Saquon Barkley good at football. I want him to be Christian McCaffrey good at football. If I'm taking Najee Harris, where I have severe question marks over the talent level of the player, and he doesn't represent this 20, 21-year-old, like, he's not Kenneth Walker from an age standpoint. He's not freaking even Javonte Williams from an age standpoint. This is a guy that is already 25 years old and has been in the NFL going into his 3rd season and has not shown an elite level ceiling. Like, even in his top season as a rookie where he showed out and he was the, a mid-range running back 1, we still had severe efficiency question marks. And typically when we see it, players that are inefficient don't suddenly get bigger workloads than the year before. So with me, with Najee Harris, it's like, yeah, like I can see him potentially in a better Steelers offense, maybe getting more scoring opportunity, maybe having more success now that he's fully a year recovered from that injury that hampered him in the offseason. But I still have question marks whether he's an elite talent. And for me personally, 25-year-old running back, where I have that question mark, should not be a 4th round pick.
Yeah, I'm a little bit more bullish on his talent level just because I think as a rookie running back, we had some efficiency question marks. We were kind of robbed to see if he could have taken a step forward last year because he played most of the season with like a Liz Frank injury. And then towards the end of the year, he started to play a little bit better. If the Steelers offense is like middle of the pack instead of one of the most unwatchable offenses in the league, like they were last year, then like you said, that workload that he's getting, which I still think will be among the best in the league, even if it's not his rookie year workload, it'll still be a top 5 opportunity share in the league. It's much more valuable in a better offense. And I think the reason I actually am a little bit higher on him than you is I do think there's room for improvement in terms of his value, even though he's a 25-year-old running back. If he goes out there and he has like the RB7 season in points per game, I think he would rise about a half round, maybe a full round in value in more casual leagues, especially.
The problem I have too is even just the running backs he's around in this list. Because if we're looking at it, he in Adiko's ADP, he is 4 picks after Josh Jacobs. Josh Jacobs is what, a year older and already proven he can be an elite level runner.
They're the same age.
Same age. 1998,
Yep.
Jacobs is same age, except Jacobs has actually shown he can be an elite NFL runner. And he was what, the RB3 last year? Yeah, like give me Josh Jacobs there. Ramondre Stevenson is basically a similar case, big running back, receiving profiles. The only thing is that Ramondre Stevenson is one of the most elusive running backs in the NFL, and Najee Harris is one of the least elusive running backs in the NFL. That's another player I would prefer over Najee Harris. Then you get into the Tony Pollard, Nick Chubb range. I think Tony Pollard and Nick Chubb are, from a talent perspective, both top 6 overall running backs in the NFL from a pure talent perspective, and both project into better offenses. So for me personally, it's not really a problem more so with what Najee Harris represents from a volume standpoint. It's more so that we're taking him over more qualified running backs in the same range.
Yeah, he kind of doesn't fit the peripherals of either. He's not an elite talent win now running back, and he's not a rebuilding running back. So there's really no reason to take him as high as he's going. But I think we beat Najee Harris to death. If you guys enjoyed this video, you can leave a like, you can subscribe, you can leave any of your comments down below. What did we get wrong? For what it's worth, Najee Harris was one of our biggest fades last year when he was a first-round pick, and I would say that definitely worked out to a high degree right now. We will be coming at you, like I said, with rounds 5 to 8, in the next coming days, rounds 9 to 12 as well. A lot more discrepancy during those rounds because, we're getting players that are going in the 5th round that we have ranked in like the 7th round and that kind of thing. So that'll be a lot of fun. Definitely check out Flock Fantasy if you want our rankings. We made reference to them throughout this video. Use the promo code FSE to get first priority on Dynasty decisions, 30% off any of the packages there, a 2-day free trial, and 6 months for free if you sign up annually. But with that being said, peace out, and we'll talk to you soon.